Well, welcome to today's presentation on the 4 tendencies and how we can bless others and ourselves. Very happy to welcome Vicki Jansma here as our presenter today. My name is Mark Mann, for those of you who don't know me, and I am the Director of Programs and Institutes here at the Catholic Information Center. And I've had a chance to meet a few new faces, but wonder if this is your first time attending one of these talks, the 55 Plus series, could you raise your hand and just, all right, welcome, welcome. Excellent. Well, hopefully you can meet some new friends as well as those of you that have been here, reconnect with old friends. Not saying anything about age, just that we're all friends here. We're all friends here. Let me tell you a little bit about the ministry of the center. We create spaces for encounter, dialogue, and community at the intersection of faith and life. And the hope of our witness to loving, believing in, and following Jesus Christ is so that all people can experience the good news of God's reign with joy. We're a ministry of the Paulist Fathers in collaboration with the Diocese of Grand Rapids. And this year we are celebrating 75 years of ministry here in Grand Rapids. So big year, big anniversary year. We're very excited. Because we are committed to fostering understanding and dialogue, I'd just like to offer a few tips, especially since we have folks joining us online as well as all of us here in the room. We do ask if you would to use one of the name tags on the table and fill that out, and you can either put it on top of the name tag that you're already wearing that proudly says visitor. And but that way we can see your name and call you as you'd like to be called, rather than just calling you visitor. And Arlene, welcome. To minimize noise and distraction, we ask that everyone keep your microphones muted when not speaking. For Arlene, we'll mute you shortly. And then during Q&A, we'll have a chance to interact with everyone here, some small group conversation, as well as with our presenter, and just ask that you raise your hand and I'll bring one of the cameras over to you, and that way our folks online can see who's interacting with the speaker or with all of us as well. It just makes for a better experience for the people that are joining us online. Let's see, and I'll help to moderate the conversation time. Arlene, if you run into any problems, feel free to use the chat function, and you can send me a message and I'll be happy to try to help you that way. All right, so thanks everyone for your cooperation on that. All right, as we continue, let's do so in prayer, and I'm going to use the prayer that is the 75th anniversary prayer. It's on the prayer card. If you'd like to join in, please feel free. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God of creativity and joy, we call upon your Holy Spirit as we celebrate 75 years of Paulist mission in West Michigan. We offer you great gratitude for the blessings you have bestowed upon the Paulists and their partners in ministry in the settings of the Information Center, campus ministry, and the cathedral. We ask you to anchor us in the reality of our present time, following the example of your Son, who became one of us and anchored himself in our time. We lay in your hands the ministry and mission of the Paulists. Allow us to be your joyful co-creators in building a future brighter than any past. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Again, very happy to welcome Vicki Jansma here today. She is a school social worker, speaker, and music minister. Been engaged in school social work and therapy for 35 years this year, so congratulations. Helping students to grow in healthy habits of mind, body, and spirit, and sharing wisdom through song and word with adults are her passions, in addition to, of course, being Nana to 2 grandchildren. And I'm sure they're just beautiful, but that would be a bias, maybe biased. She especially looks for opportunities to help others find and use new insights on our journey toward God and toward becoming all that God intends us to be. Quoting Dr.Maya Angelou, one of her favorite authors, when we know better, we do better. Please help me welcome Dr. Vicki Jansma.
That's the first time I've ever been called doctor.
Yeah, I realize.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, welcome everybody. It's really, I say this sincerely, a pleasure to be here. And I get just a little bit excited about the 4 tendencies because I've just found them to be such a blessing in my life. So I will try to remember to tell myself to slow down. And also a couple housekeeping things. We're at the age and stage where we might need to be visiting something before the break. Obviously, take a break when you need to, but we are going to pause about halfway through this 4 bathroom breaks. And please ask questions as we go along. We're going to do a few, like talk with folks at your table, and I'm going to try to give a lot of examples, but feel free to interrupt. It's not interrupting because as I've learned about this and applied it in my own life, I am always thinking of new ways to remind my brain of how I can use it to the good, to the benefit of myself and others. And that's why I say that. When Dr. Maya Angelou says, when we know better, we do better. When we know more about ourselves, when we know more about the tendencies of the people we love, and also the people that are the challenge people in our lives, I find it particularly helpful for the people that are my challenge people. So let's just dive in. First of all, how many people had a chance to take the quiz? Did you have a chance to take the quiz? About half. Okay, no worries if you did not. There's a free quiz by Gretchen Rubin. I think over 2 million people have taken the quiz. And I have the URL at the end. But you'll be able to figure out mostly who you are. And if you have a good friend, neighbor, spouse, even adult child, you'll have some good guesses. So this is her book, The 4 Tendencies. And I think that I think it came out, I think we're at the 5-year anniversary. And I was trying to remember how I first heard about it because she, let me just tell you a couple about her. I've got a slide, but let me just tell you a little bit about her. She's a New York Times bestselling author that wrote The Happiness Project. And what she did, she's a voracious reader. She also has a phenomenal memory. So when she reads something, she actually remembers how that connects to the other. I know. Big eyes. I know, me too. Like, okay, yeah, I read that, but the connection right there, not as much. Her books have been translated into many languages, but they're all about knowing ourselves and how knowing that can help us have lives that are, I don't want to say happier in the, sunny skies kind of thing, but more content, more productive, more at ease with who we are. God made us individually as those snowflakes. But what she recognized, and she's a keen observer of human behavior, is that people kind of fell into these 4 groups about how they respond to expectations. And there was a lot of research behind it before she came up with these, but I hope you'll find them useful. I'll tell you 2 ways in which I found it the most useful. One thing is with my beloved husband, who's a questioner. So we've been married 44 years, get along great most of the time. I can tell you the times that we had a clash that went on where it wasn't resolved, fairly easy, is before I understood that he was a questioner, before I understood that I needed to present it in a different way. And I'm not saying we have smooth sailing all the time, but it's really improved our relationship. And before he understood, I'm an upholder. So just in my marriage and in my grown son. So as a teenager, up through teenage years, college, he was an upholder. I mean, really, give him the rule, he'll follow it, got straight A's, never went to the principal's office. When he got to college, he became an upholder questioner. So, and he's got the engineer mind. So as we share things now, again, he's going to be 40, the 1st of December. how can that be? But anyway, you know how that time goes. I have learned since I got this framework that if there's something, because he's a questioner, and I know we're going to go through each of them, because he's a questioner, he's done a lot of research on things and he's done a lot of thinking. So if mom comes along and says, you know, I used to like to say, well, what about this? To a questioner, that can feel like an insult, as if he hadn't done all the research. So mom has learned a few secrets about talking to her questioner son, which I will share with you in case you have one. Again, not to persuade him that my idea is always right, but with questioners, we might want them to be open to having another piece of information that they have not personally researched themselves. So, all right, let me get my slideshow going here. And I just use the slideshow because to remind myself, and also to kind of keep us on pace, because I could start yakking and that might not be as informative to you. I will say, you don't need to take notes on the tendencies because we've got a handout. Gretchen Rubin gives these out freely. We got them and they're there. And also I gave all of us a specific sheet on using the 4 tendencies with their sweethearts and spouses. And that I would also include siblings, my best friend from 40 years, you know, anyone really close to us. So we have those particular ones. So this is just a picture of me. And today, what's our plan? We're going to talk about the tendencies. We're going to then go back and do each one more in detail. And again, you don't have to memorize this. What I would suggest, if this is your first time hearing about the tendencies, is you just, when we get to yours, if you know yours, kind of think, oh, does that fit or not? And if it's not yours, from the information, picture someone in your life and just see, check it out. I always say, check this out for yourself. And Gretchen Rubin would say that too. Check this out for yourself. It is not a personality like it's not a personality typing, but it's more the way we operate in this world. How do we respond to outer expectations, what the world wants from us, what people close to us? You know, some of us may still be working, or we're on, when I say work, I'm also talking about volunteer work. We're on committees. We're working on something, on a group project. We're at the Meyer Gardens because we're working with groups of people. So how we respond to other people's explanations, but then how the 4 types respond to their own inner expectations, what we want for ourselves. And before I get started too, one of the first questions Gretchen is always asked is, if I don't like my tendency, can I change it? So she would say no, and I would agree with that. First of all, I would say, why do you want to? Because we need every bit of all the 4 groups. I'm just telling you, if the whole world were obligers, we would be chaos. If the whole world were rebels. So I think God wired us to have a mixture, to bring different gifts. Does each tendency have a gift and a challenge? Every single one does. Okay, so that's what we're going to learn too. And the second thing is, I really do believe that the way our brains are wired, and just working with kids all this time, is that we have kind of my son, for example, he just, you know, he's the kind of kid you could look at when he was at least about 5 and say, don't do that. And he wouldn't do it most of the time, you know, 90%. You know, I'm at school, I look at one of my kindergartners and I'm saying, that's not a great idea. You know, it's just over the head. What my opinion or what the rule is not registering in the same way. So one caveat about children though, anybody up to about 16, 18, is I don't think we want to predetermine. If you have grandchildren, if you're blessed like me, let's not be thinking about this on them, okay? Because remember, for one thing, their brain, a fully developed male brain is, sorry guys, it's not till 25. So women are a little earlier, you know, the full growth of the brain. So let's have observations. You might see kind of a, you know, like a, well, a lot of the time they do this, and use your wisdom from the tendencies, but let's give them room to grow and learn. Okay. And also, I think that it's kind of like my body is wired to be cold. It's like my hands right now are chilly. It's perfectly warm in here. So that's the way I'm wired. My body was wired so that by the time I was in 7th grade, I needed glasses. I believe that the tendencies, also the way we respond to things, is probably hardwired in there somewhere. So let's jump into it if that's okay. And I just want to say the bottom one, let's learn how to work with people who are not our tendency. That to me is one of the most valuable things that I learned from this. Not everybody thinks about the world in the way Vicki does. What a revelation, you know? Like my husband, yeah. So, well, and he would say the same thing to me, you know? Here's a little story about us. So my mother-in-law was an obliger, but you never got to church late. I'm just saying. So she and I would be ready to go to mass, you know, get there 20 minutes early. And that drove him nuts for both of us. He would say, we can get there at 5 minutes too. We're upholders. We get to places on time. We're not fudging the time we arrive. So I drive him crazy sometimes too. I just want to say anything I say about my husband, he could say about me, in the way that sometimes my upholding can get a little rigid. So this is her question. This is what it all started. She was having lunch with a friend who said, you know, I cannot figure out why this friend wanted to begin exercising pretty regularly, 2 or 3 times a week. So when I was in college, I was on a track team. I showed up at 5:30 a.m. 5 days a week to run track. I'm a grown-up. I have more agency. I cannot get myself to get up in the morning before work, even twice a week. Just, I can't figure it out. So Gretchen started thinking, why is that? The long and short of it was, she's an obliger. When she had people waiting for her on a team in an accountability group, she had no problem following her own, I want to get exercise and be healthy. So I think that how do I respond to expectations is the real value of this. This is Gretchen, picture of her. She's written some other books. The Happiness Project was on the list for a long time. She's also a real person that has, I think there's like 50 ideas in here about if you really have a habit you'd like to change, when you'd either like to start and you just can't get yourself going, or when you want to stop and you can't get yourself stopping. This Better Than Before, I really learned some great things from it. And on her website, she has samples of all of her books. And then I'm an upholder, so I love outer order. That's just the way I'm wired. So she wrote this book called Outer Order, Inner Calm. And of course, I love it. So, but it's not just for upholders, because there's actually scientific research to show that when we have a lot of, I don't want to say chaos in a bad sense, because some of us like to leave our things laying out. We'd like to see them. But if there's not a sense of order so that even you can find your own things, it does create inner turmoil. It takes more energy for us to do the simple thing we want to do. I want to find my car keys because I want to get going, or I want that recipe. So she really, that's a really good book for that. Okay, so here we are. Not in any particular order. She just usually starts with the upholder, maybe because she's one. What I want you to notice is that all of these intersect. So I am an upholder questioner. So I'm actually in that area. So just briefly, an upholder, which I am. Do we have any other upholders here? We're kind of a small group. Okay. Yep. We meet pretty well, outer expectations, and we meet our own inner expectations. Again, nothing's 100%. How about obligers? You guys are the biggest group. Yes, I'm just saying you guys run the world. I'm just saying 75%, she found this, 75% of committees, organizations, think tanks, whatever, have many more obligers on them than questioners and rebels, because you carry a lot of the load. So now there's a downside to being an obliger, because sometimes you can take on too much. We'll talk about that. So an obliger meets outer expectations, but sometimes you don't grant the same grace to yourself. You might give and give and give and not say no, so that you can say yes to yourself. Okay, if I'm describing somebody, then you may want to pass this on, because that's a real struggle that obligers have. Questioners, they resist outer. How many questioners do we have? We need at least a few in every group. Questioners, you resist. It doesn't mean you say automatically no. Outer expectations, because you want to know the reason why, and it needs to make sense to you. An organization that doesn't have a questioner doesn't have someone who will think outside the box or think of why we're doing something. Okay, so you're very valuable. And then but they'll meet their inner expectations. Like, I want to make sure that I'm showing up for my spouse in this way. I want to make sure at work that I set the goal I set for myself for getting things done. I'm pretty okay with it. Mark, you're nodding your head. That makes sense. Okay, rebels.
It's okay that I question whether or not
you're a questioner. Yeah, I was telling Mark this. Every time I've done a group, I will have a questioner come up and say, I took that quiz. I'm not really sure I'm a questioner. And I have to laugh every time, because I actually purchased a course from Gretchen. She has a whole course on this and has videos, and it's really quite amazing. But anyway, she said, every questioner I've ever met comes up to me about the quiz and says, I'm not really sure I'm that. So we have to laugh. That kind of confirms it, Mark. I'm sorry. It's kind of. Yeah. All right. A little bit of head nodding. Yeah. And beloved rebels. Do we have any rebels? We should. We should. All right. All right. Love it. We would not be a country without rebels. We would not allow women to vote without rebels. I mean, I could go on and on, right? Rebels, you question outer expectations, but sometimes you resist your own inner expectations. You can't, the downside of being a rebel, sometimes you can't get yourself to do what you would like to do. So I hope I've even just started giving you, everyone has a, oh, I love this part about me, and I don't like this part about me so much. That's why actually you don't want to change tendencies. You know yours best, and everyone has a gift. I say every person that finds their tendency has a gift to give to this world. You do. So don't spend your energy thinking, oh, I like the other one better. Because remember, the other one has a downfall too. All right. So how is this going to help me? First of all, it's going to help us make better decisions on about how we want to get done. If I understand that as a rebel that I need some extra help to get myself to do what I want to do, then I'll be more successful. If I understand as an upholder that not everyone sees the world the way I do, I will have more kindness and compassion and just have a bigger lens, so that I don't feel free to criticize how other people do things. And in my younger years, I was quite bossy, because I get things done and I get them done right. And if everybody would do the way I want it to be done, we'd all be better off. Well, you can imagine how that went over. even among 8-year-old girlfriends. So just telling you, I have to laugh because my granddaughter's 5 and we're kind of wired the same. And I was my first time to volunteer at school yesterday, making a scarecrow with 17 pieces to cut, glue, and whatever, with 4 different groups. So anyway, when she comes over to the group, she's herding the other kids over. Now, this is my Nana. She wants you to sit, and sit where it is. Don't be giving her any. She's like directing everybody already. I said, Alice, honey, I got it. Because some of the kids are looking at her like, who made you the boss? So anyway, when we understand ourselves better, I don't know. I just feel less stressed. I'm more compassionate to myself. When I get on that, kind of like, wow, it's so frustrating when people won't meet their deadlines. I have that thought that comes right away. Remember, other people don't see the same importance that you do. So there's more than one way to look at this, Vicki. I feel less stressed because I understand myself. The other thing is, if I am working with other people or living with another person, if I understand how that person's wired, like I said, I learned some ways to speak to my husband, question her husband, and question her son that helped us meet in the middle more. If we have a habit that we want to change, if I'm a rebel and I want to, get up earlier or do something, I want to have devotions in the morning and do yoga in the morning, and I just love my bed because I worked for years and I just love sleeping in. Anyway, I do love sleeping in. But I really, this is a goal for me. How can I work with myself then? How can I boost my ability to do what it is I've identified I want to do? And then if we understand ourselves, I'm a social worker. You have to know that. And I've always been a listener, even growing up as a kid. People came to me with their problems, and I'm a good listener. And so I've observed human behavior for a long time, and I just love knowing more. Okay, let's start with Upholder. So here, she has a little saying for everybody. We just want to know what should be done. And that is me. Just tell me what to do. Honestly, if I moved to another country and you gave me a list of where, this is how you catch the bus, this is where you want to eat, I wouldn't have the anxiety that I have sometimes when I visit places when I think, I don't know the rules. That just makes me feel a little anxious until I get into it. So Upholders, just tell us what to do. So here's some common characteristics. And again, those are right on your sheets. If you have little ideas you want to put on there, that's fine. But otherwise, sometimes I say to people, just be present, just listen. Because I'm going to share this with you when we're done, anybody that wants the slideshow. And Gretchen she has a wonderful website. It's all free stuff to download. So we're self-directed. We meet deadlines. Someone can give us a job and we don't really need to be supervised. So for some organizations, even in some families, it's like with my husband, he had 4 sisters, and it'd be like they couldn't decide when we're going to have Thanksgiving. So like the second year I'm there, I'm like, hey guys, how about we do it this way? Because we talk about it till the day before, and then nobody knew when to start their stuff. So we do enjoy routines. Now, again, some of the shadow, we're kind of uncomfortable when we're out of routine. I worked at Kenowa Hills for 30 years, retired, and then went back to this little school I'm working at. And I walk in, I don't know one staff member. I don't have an office. I don't know how they do social work. And I was a fish out of water I was pretty anxious, and I'm trying to work with kids who are anxious, so I had to get myself. Having had enough experience with my own anxiety and telling myself, of course you're, not comfortable. You're an upholder. You want to know what these people want you to do. So I talk to myself that way and get a little bit more grounded. Here's the thing about us upholders. We do hate to make mistakes. And there's another part about upholders, my husband will tell you. We hate to be corrected. Yes, we can get a little angry and defensive. My husband, God bless him, has learned over the years, I watch it now that I know this. I watch his body language when he wants to tell me something. First of all, he'll kind of come up and he'll soften his voice and he'll say, you probably didn't think of this, or I know you've been a little tired. He'll always do a little caveat, but this is what happened. And honestly, him knowing that about me and learning to speak to me that way, I can own it so much better. In the old days, when he, kind of, as we do when we're having a conflict with someone we really love, kind of spout off, all that did is bring up my defenses. I mean, honestly, it's kind of like, because I try really hard not to make mistakes. Some of us upholders are also perfectionists, so that's me. So I've already filtered all this stuff in my brain. So unless I wasn't paying attention, I've kind of like, set. So it's hard for me to be corrected. Much more easily now that I know this is the way my brain works. When someone tells me, if you came up to me later and said, Vicki, this was kind of distracting, this thing. Rather than me first freaking out that I didn't do the presentation perfectly, I would be able to say, you're probably right. I'll try to remember to do that. But before I would have gone like, well, you're not up here presenting, I would just go into my defense, see? So knowing that when I know better, I do better. I love that about this. We do place a high value on follow through. Like if you ask me to do something, I am the last person that will quit on you. I really am. Sometimes that's not a great characteristic, because sometimes we should, if a group process or even something that someone else suggested we do isn't going well, we might be better off being a questioner and saying, why am I doing this? But we're really good on follow through. That's why I don't need supervision. And if I'm in a group and you volunteer to do something and you don't follow through, ooh, yeah, watch my shoulders. Ooh. Now, again, learn to zip it, because not everybody sees the importance of follow through that we upholders do. And when someone hasn't, they really don't need to be criticized for it by someone who pretty easily can follow through. It's not equally easy for some of the other groups to follow through on an outer expectation. Their brain is just not wired that way. So it's good for me to know that about myself. So when I worked at school, and when you're at school, you get, as many things, you get put on committees. And as I grew and learned, I stopped myself from being the leader all the time, because then sometimes my tendency to do it my way or the highway would take over. So being a social worker, I do want to be also a peacemaker. So, but I had one committee where I was working, and we did have a deadline. The superintendent was wanted us to come and present. And I had worked with this person before, and they love being given an assignment, but they rarely got it done. And I'm nervous. I'm the upholder. We're supposed to have it done. And so I had to really struggle with it, and I was not the leader, So I ended up speaking to the leader who didn't know the other person and just saying, as gently as I could, we probably should pair up or something. I think I said, or something. We should pair up so that it's not too much work for them, or they don't feel like they have to do it on their own. And so we made the deadline. That particular pair, the other person made sure the pace stayed, and we were able to do it. So in my before knowing this, I would have just almost gotten outraged. Well, if you're not going to do it, then don't say you're going to do it. To me, that just makes perfect sense. I don't say I'm going to do something if I can't. Now, again, we all get sick. We all have other things that happen. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the normal pace of things. So I probably share more downsides because I'm an upholder and I know my own self. So than I have the other groups, but I think it's good to understand we have strengths and we have things that are challenges. This is me. May need reminders that others aren't necessarily as energized or comforted by accomplishing things. I love to have a little list and check off my little list. Others, that drives them nuts. Do not give my husband a list. No. And do not question where he is on the list. Because he's the questioner. Yes, yes, yes. And a not so great thing, I do have trouble delegating responsibilities because others might seem unreliable. And again, I don't mean that in just a judgment, more like their enthusiasm is great at the beginning of a project, and then they get scattered by other things, and it just, the ball gets dropped. So as you can see, there's a combination of things I love about my tendency and things I continue to work on. So this is I think on there. So we all have advantages and disadvantages. So as an upholder, we are pretty much a self-starter and we're self-motivated. You can kind of give us a job, let us go. We're conscientious, we're responsible, we're thorough. We don't just take the easy way usually. And we really want to understand and meet the expectations. We want to know the rules and the deadlines. And that just is so comforting to me and to us upholders. Now, again, my side I continue to always work on, I can act defensively when I get challenged because I kind of like being in charge. And this is my natural tendency to think I pretty much know the right way to do something. Not so much, but anyway, I can be rigid, although less so, and my part of it's the maturity of life experience and having it not turn out so well when I am rigid, that's a gift. I love these elder in years. I love the wisdom of them. And sometimes adjusting to change, like a quickly changing set of rules, that's hard for me. Once I understand them, I don't want them changed midway. Oh no, the deadline, I gave everybody an extra 2 weeks and I stayed up, So one time when my son was in 4th grade, he had this teacher that would, she gave this assignment on Friday morning. And it was kind of a, for 4th grade, it was a poster and all this stuff. And we were going to go skiing. We stayed home from skiing so he could hand it in Monday. And then I happened to be volunteering that day and I got there and she said, oh, I decided we could do it, like Thursday. I was just livid, and not that every time you're going to give up a ski trip, but, my value is education and being responsible. If you get an assignment, you do it. And I would have loved actually to have a questionnaire part of my brain go, wait just a minute. That's kind of unreasonable. Maybe I should give that teacher a call and see if we could. I would have liked to have my brain have that questionnaire and then we would have gone skiing that weekend. So I learned. And sometimes, although again, not as much, I can be kind of impatient or judgmental of other people when they don't meet expectations. So if you're on the other end of that of me, that's not fun. Less so now. That's why I love this, because now I have that thought of, wait a minute, they're a questioner. Wait a minute, they're a rebel. They don't want you to have any expectations. You have to learn. Yes, sir.
Do you offer couple counseling?
Well, it's funny. I think Gretchen Rubin has been asked that. And there are some therapists that uses as a gift to their, to their groups. I do not. Sorry. But you know what? I think when we go through them all and we can laugh at, but in all honesty, not only if I had known this earlier in my marriage, we would have, gotten to a better place of understanding, and I was telling Mark this, when we get to the rebels, if I had a student in middle school that I worked with from 6th to 8th grade. Again, I never use names, but nobody had ever graduated in his family. His dad was in jail. So you can imagine. And none of us could get him to do more than 20% of his work for 3 years, 6, 7th, and 8th. The way he faced the world was as a rebel, and I did everything wrong in the way I approached him because I did not understand that. So it's been a blessing in that if I had that student again, I'm not saying that would have changed, but I would have felt like I had a fighting chance with that. We're about halfway done. If anybody wants to take a break, I'm happy to give a 5-minute break, or if you want to keep going, please don't be embarrassed if you need to. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about being an upholder,
Yes.
Are you a procrastinator?
Go ahead. You want to repeat that again?
I said, when
Yeah.
you talk about being an upholder.
Yes.
Do you also consider yourself a procrastinator?
I
Where would that be put?
personally am not a procrastinator. I could see where sometimes upholders may, because they want to get it right and they want to be so thorough that, like, if they had a project that was, pretty massive and they were feeling anxious about it. So you're wondering if there's a tendency where procrastination enters in more?
Well, when you're challenged, you don't want to face that challenge. So do you procrastinate? You do face it in the end.
Yeah.
But do you procrastinate getting to it?
Oh, interesting. Earlier in my life, yes. Not so much lately.
Is that maturity?
Experience? Yeah. It helps. It helps. Or that things don't turn out so well when you're procrastinating long, Yes. That's a great question, though. I wonder, that's a good question to examine. If any of the tendencies, how would they handle procrastination? We'll have to have that good question. Yeah.
I'm a procrastinator. That's why I want.
Okay. And do you know what tendency you are?
No, that's why I.
Okay.
Kind of fit myself into the
Upholder?
The group.
Yeah.
But I can see out of so many things.
Sure.
I am all of these.
Okay.
But not anything in particular.
Okay.
But I am a procrastinator.
Ah.
And that's where.
So you're
I
wondering.
can get things done,
Mhm.
but it seems like if it's a real challenge and it's something I've never done before,
Mhm.
it takes me longer to get to it.
Okay. Interesting. I just haven't thought about that before. I'd have to give it a little more thought. Yeah. We're going to wait a second for you get to be on camera. There you go. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to that one slide where you had the 4 circles
Yes.
connecting with, okay. Are you saying then that we may have a primary
Yes.
domain, so to speak?
Yes.
And then can we say that we have wings?
Yes. That's a perfect way to put it. The reason, yes, if you look at like me with the purple, I don't intersect with the rebel.
We could be friends, though.
We could be friends. Yeah. In fact, it's funny because some are married. They can be married. Yeah. Yes, but you're exactly right. Like, you can be an upholder obliger.
Oh.
You could be an upholder questioner. I am an upholder questioner. I was pretty much an upholder until my 40s and 50s, but as I just have more questions. I think part of that's maturity. I don't have to have things so answered rigid. You could be interesting. You could be a rebel obliger, and we'll talk when we get to rebel. We'll talk about you still might have that with certain people or in certain situations. So yes, that's a great question.
And a second point, as you're sharing this, some of us who have been in formation type work, this and what you have to offer, and you yourself could, if you wanted to make some extra money, is that this is an ideal presentation or program for people who have been married 3 years.
Yeah.
Marriage preparation in the before marriage, it's not all that effective. But where people really begin to have issues, where they somewhat effective. But where people really begin to have issues is in the 3rd year.
You're right.
And these are the things that are important.
Mhm.
And my friend over there, Phil, is having a coronary, so I have to go over and chat with him because he and Karen do marriage preparation.
Yeah.
Put it this
No,
way,
it's true.
the marriage preparation that I used to do for folks wasn't all that effective.
We'll rebel with the cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, but excellent for people 3 years.
The agenda, yeah, hold up to the agenda that we're here.
Which we can take questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Karen, you had your hand first.
Okay. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure that we get to everything. Let's see. So we did, any other questions about upholders? Again, I know for most of you, it's very, yes. Do I need something? Slow down. Yes, thank you. See, it's not,
It's picking up.
okay, good. I've been told, oh, good, that's better, actually. I've been told I also need to slow down. Remember when I get excited about this stuff? Yes, okay, but I will. But that's even better. I mean, for,
Oh, yeah.
okay, good. Questioners, here you are. Here's your motto. Tell me why. Tell me why, and I'll do anything if I, yes, ma'am.
Imagine that you obviously he's a upholder like the almost like the year, like it on his marriage confident. And but we've been married 62 years. We wanted it together.
I would guess that you have figured out some of this stuff before having a framework.
Yeah.
You know, when we live with people and we observe them and we have all these interactions, if we're not learning from each other, we're not paying attention. So many blessings on that, many years. Questioners, you are so amazing, really. Questioners, they question all expectations, but they will meet outer ones or inner. If you truly believe in the reason and the logic and the cause, you can get yourself to pretty much do whatever it is you want to do or someone else wants you to do. This is my son, highly values research, data, information, and reasoning. He's got that engineer mind. He's a computer science guy. He's a little unusual in that he also has that social emotional side. When he went to work at Microsoft, I remember they said, your kid's kind of unusual. He's not just about the data. He's got people skills. I said, well, he had a social worker as a mother. So we did do a little bit of insistence of turning off that computer and going and doing stuff. I have to say, though, we were the third house in Grand Rapids to get cable modem because my 13-year-old was calling them every week to see when it was going to be in our neighborhood, unknowns to me. That story all turned out well, but one of the things that I really appreciated about him during the pandemic, because I have an anxiety disorder. And so you can imagine that the unknown, as for all of us, but he did a lot of research on good, reliable sources that kind of sifted through things. And we would talk about our family plan, you know, not relying just on the news or whatever. And I really appreciated and felt confident in his research. Questioners really struggle with anything arbitrary. So you never want to say to a questioner, because I told you so. Doesn't go over well, even to a questioner teenager. I'm not saying we don't have authority, but it doesn't work in their brain. You might as well just not say anything to them if you're going to say, I told you, because I tell you to. Teachers struggle a little bit with questioners in middle and high school. I'm going to go through these and then go back. They will, questioner, you will follow authority if you believe in the source. If you believe in the value and in the reliability of the source, you will follow what needs to be done, your own or other people's. Sometimes their persistent questioning can make a questioner seem uncooperative, annoying, or wanting to, rev up things. So if you're in a group, working on something in a group, and you have one person that's always like, well, what about this? And have you thought about that? And you just, what about one more question? I just want to keep going with the slideshow. If you have someone like that, that is the way their brain is wired. It's not meant to personally annoy us, even though sometimes it can feel that way. I had to work with many of my teachers, particularly in middle school. I think it's kind of an age of being questioning. I'm not sure it's all their tendency, but I had this one student, very bright, and actually some of the time he could get his work done in 10, 15 minutes. But if you had to arbitrarily do 25 math problems, didn't make any sense to him. So he was failing math. Yeah, I know, that's middle school thinking. So I had to talk with the teacher and say, one of the ways you could approach him is to say, I know your brain's probably going to get this pretty quickly in the first, 5 to 10, but it really wouldn't be fair, would it, for you to only have to do 10? Because he also believed in fairness. And so that was our hook for that student. He just said, eye rolling. I say I perfected that, eye rolling in middle school. Got him to do his homework. Now, if we hadn't understood that, and the teacher, not only about how many problems to do, but how she was teaching it, because he could probably teach it himself. And sometimes he actually, I had him show me once something in algebra. I understood his way better than the teacher had. So he also had good information. But let's just say in a middle school, you got 25 kids, you can't have someone challenging you all the time, constantly. So he and I then had to work out a system. He had a little tick thing. He could ask 3 questions per class, and he better save them up for good ones. Okay? Because otherwise it was just a barrage. But that's the way his brain thought. He was very bright. He'd get this, but then he would, like if the teacher was going here, he'd have side mirrors. He was looking at this, and it was legitimate, but he was disrupting the flow. So if you're on a committee with someone and you're trying to get a certain amount of work done or meet a deadline, and you have a questioner who is so lovely with other ways to think of things, the leader may have to say, good idea, let's put it on our board over here and keep going. Otherwise, questioners also, the downside of it is sometimes their questions won't shut off in their brain. Gretchen tells the story of 2 questioners that were married to each other. I just laugh at this story. So their dishwasher broke. 3 years later, they have not decided what brand dishwasher to buy, because there's one more place to research. One more, well, if we bought that one, then so I always, when I have my husband, I would say, okay, are you being a dishwasher right now? I mean, he knows what that means. At some point with questioners, we just have to say, good enough, good enough. So it's always out of an intention to do the very best. It's never meant to be like, I don't like your answer. They're the people in our society that broaden our viewpoint instead of us having that narrower. So we need questioners. Like I said, back when my son was in 4th grade, I should have had that. Hey, I don't have to do what the teacher says. I should have had that viewpoint. That would have helped me. So questioners are so valuable. They have to learn how to monitor their questioning. And those of us that love them, live with them, or work with them have to say when they're starting to have too many, that's just the way their brain works. That really helps me. It reminds me they're not doing it just to be annoying. Because it can feel like it. I'm sorry. I've been on committees where I just thought, or you've been at a conference all day and you're at the last 3 minutes and you want to get out because you've been sitting for 8 hours. They're always the one that will have a question for the speaker that's going to go beyond, and everybody's glaring at them. Anyway, God bless you, questioners. Now here's the other funny thing, Mr. Mark. Just like being questioned ourselves, because we consider our actions carefully first, so we find it tiresome or even insulting to have our ideas questioned.
I already figured out the right way to do it.
It's exactly true. It's kind of like my upholder tendency when I don't often make, I'm not perfect. I don't often make bigger mistakes. So when you point one out to me, that's hard for me to hear. Questioners do not like, after they've done exhaustive research, for you to say, are you sure? Yeah. Hey, that might actually be a good phrase. That's a gentler phrase than a few others I could think of. Yeah. And the other thing about, and so again, questioners and upholders, we share some things. We have trouble delegating because we don't think I don't sometimes think other people will be as reliable in meeting expectations. Questioners don't think they'll do the research, that they'll just kind of pick the easiest or the most, agreed upon way. It may not be the right thing for the group. So she tells another story of questioner married to a rebel, and they were trying to decide where to go for family vacation. So the questioner takes this on 6 months before to do the research on where to go. I think they had 3 little kids. I mean, if you can imagine going somewhere with 3 little kids, you're going to eliminate some vacation. And so they're getting up to the deadline, and the rebel is like, well, when are you going to book, even the rebel, like, when are you going to book those tickets? I think she was the mom and she needed vacation, and he's like, well, I got one more website. Well, they got past the time where they could actually afford any tickets because the questionnaire kept researching another. Let's just say that household got very quiet that evening. And they ended up making another plan, but it was a lesson to the questioner that at some point I have to shut my own brain off. Or if I live with someone else, they need to help me say, good enough, because we're just not wired as questioners to kind of shut that part of our brain off. So let's look at these. So questioners, you're kind of data driven. That doesn't mean that you are on Google all the time. When we're talking about data, we're talking about your life experience. We're talking about books you've read. We're talking about conferences you've gone to. You love learning and you try to integrate that. That's really, like I said, sometimes my son's brain is really amazing, and I just appreciate all the effort he puts into that. And you're also valuable in an organization because you're highly, I'm pointing at Mark just because he's one of the questioners, highly interested in creating systems that are efficient and effective. So you are such a good addition to a system that maybe flounders, doesn't deliver on what its intention is because people are mired. They're not using some of the latest tools, or they're not understanding how an organization works. So your brain is very valuable. You're very strong-willed, and you can buck the system. And I mean that when the system should be bucked. There are some systems we should not be going along with. You can, for the good of the whole, if you think it's warranted. You can be the questioner. Think of our whistleblowers that did not give up. We need them. We need them. So it can be a struggle. That whole dishwasher thing is called analysis paralysis. At some point, it's really hard for questioners to stop getting that one more piece of information that's really going to help them. Help them tip it one way. I just think of those dishwashers. So they hand wash dishes for 3 years. I'd love to know if they ever bought a dishwasher, maybe. Yeah. And you may resist answering others' questions or about being questioned, because again, you've kind of done the research. And you may struggle to accept closure. Again, this can be kind of, I just think of it as being in a family where my sister-in-law's, well, what about if we started at this time? No, so-and-so hasn't happened. What about this? At some point, somebody has to blow the whistle and say, hey, we know what we know right now. Let's pick a direction and go. Otherwise, we have analysis paralysis we're not going to get anything done. So I think just understanding if you live with a questioner, if you work with a questioner, if you have a questioner that's son, daughter-in-law, neighbor. One of my neighbors was a questioner, and they were coming through our neighborhood to do something. I don't know, it might have been sidewalks, you know, when they come. And I'm an upholder. They tell me they're coming through, you know, I make sure the cars aren't parked there and everything. My neighbor's calling them every day for the week before. Well, what kind of content are you going to have in the cement? Because, you know, when we were here before, it broke. I mean, good question. How qualified are the people installing? I mean, these are good, but I'm just saying those poor people, when they showed up, you know, they were just there to do a job. And he came back out and started asking them more questions. So I happened to be outside, and I know him really well. And I went over and said, you know, Bob, you know, remember, these are not the people that decided to do this. These are the people that got to get it done in a certain amount of time because they got to be over here. We probably should let them get to work. And so I'm going kind of like this, you know, and he goes, yes, but I said, yeah, tell me that question. So whoops, I should get back over here. That's one of the times when enough answers get the sidewalk, because I wanted my sidewalk done. You know, they were doing his first. I wanted mine done. Yeah. So anything about questioners, or do you know someone that's a questioner? I'm going to let you guys talk at your table because I think questioners are pretty interesting. So let's take a few minutes at our tables. And again, it's okay to guess if we know somebody is a questioner. We can be right or wrong. Or have you been in a situation, family, neighbor, committee, where you worked with a questioner, and how did that turn out? Do you have any tips for the rest of us? Well, let's take about 5 minutes to do that. My timekeeper is just reminded me. My timekeeper has just reminded me that I'm going over a little, which is okay. So anyway, I know lunch comes. So I'm going to move forward and we'll come back if we have a few minutes for questioners, okay? Because we got 2 more to do. We have the biggest group, you obligers. How many obligers do we have again? Yeah, okay. Yeah, and some of you that didn't take the quiz, you may be too. So obligers, you have no trouble following outer expectations. Like somebody asked you to do something, you are there. You're kind of like an upholder in that. But trying to get yourself to do things sometimes is more of a struggle. So your motto is make me accountable and I'll do anything for anyone. So that you readily meet, I'm good. Yeah. Okay. Readily meet outer expectations. Like a loved one asks you, will you make that casserole? You'll make that casserole. Your neighbor says, I'm going to be gone for the weekend. Would you feed my cat? No question. You would never forget that. If you had bosses before, boss could give you a assignment. I'm there. I'm doing it. No question. But you might struggle to meet your own inner expectations. I'd really like to carve out a little more time for reading. Doesn't happen. I'd really like to, I'd like to spend a little bit more time with my neighbor down the street who doesn't get out a lot. Really do want to do it. Doesn't happen. So things that are sometimes valuable to you, and especially in the self-care area, like taking better care of ourselves, making sure we aren't spending all our time helping other people, that we keep some time for quiet, that we get some exercise, that we feed our souls, because we're giving out a lot. So in order to, so it's not a matter of what can we do then as an obliger to meet other people's expectations, because we do that. But how can we get ourselves to honor our own needs and our own expectations? That's harder. The number one thing that helps obligers is some kind of accountability outside yourself. Rob's smiling. I know that they are obligers. Two obligers married to each other. We'll see. Yes. So let's say that I'm an obliger and really my doctor has said, your blood pressure is a little high. I know you're super busy and you do all these things for other people, but I need you to cut back a little bit because I want you to make sure you take a walk every day and I want you to do these things. And it is your intention and it just doesn't happen. So you might join a walking group. You might say to your doctor, I'm going to call you in 2 weeks and I'm going to tell you, your nurse, how many times I walked in the last. We you know how upholders don't need supervision. In fact, actually, I don't like it. Obligers, that is your number one tool, accountable to someone else. Remember the track person in high school that showed up every morning for 5:30? The rest of the team would have missed her. She wouldn't have been training with them. They couldn't have gone to the track meets. But when she tried to get herself to get up, she couldn't. So she joined with a friend, had to meet, I think they were in New York or something, had to meet, halfway. They lived within running distance. They had to be there halfway, each of them, so they could check in. And then they set up a little thing. Hey, if we do this 3 days a week, then we're going to go to the bookstore and get ourselves, like a treat, like a book I really want or something. Obligers really, like in a work group, if you're an obliger and you're taking on some things, but you know that you're almost volunteering for, do we have anybody that is called volunteer? Automatic volunteer, I'll do it. Anybody, an obliger, especially when you, yeah, okay, yep. Do you know what happens in retirement too? We obligers raise the expectation because we're not working anymore. So we should have 15 things we're volunteering for. I see a lot of heads nodding. It can creep up on you, folks. I'm just saying that. And everything in itself is good and wonderful. But overall, if you are busier than when you were working and you're still not taking care of yourself, or you're still not carving out that time for that best friend, you said, hey, when I retire, we're going to have coffee every week. Then please just understand that's the way you're wired, and begin to give as much importance to your care as you do to other people's care. Okay, not less. The other thing that can happen, so obligers, you have trouble setting limits. That hand is, down. One of my friends said she went for 30, she called it detox. She went for 30 days, did not volunteer for one thing. She said the first 3 times she tried it, she broke out in a sweat. She was so wired, she felt so guilty. But she said after she kind of broke that habit, she started saying, why am I doing all of this? For one thing, other people should be caring. When you obligers take on everything, other people skate. I'm just telling you, we should be letting other people do some things too. The other thing that can happen is sometimes people become burned out. Our obligers can get really burned out, and obliger rebellion happens. You never think as an obliger you're ever going to rebel. You almost get, you start getting these thoughts like, no one appreciates me. I never have time for myself. Why did I say yes? This is a stupid project. When you start getting those thoughts, please pay attention, because then we lose your very valuable contributions. And sometimes obligers will just quit everything all at once. Sometimes you read about people who have been, the workhorse at an agency, and they go in and they quit. They just quit. Maybe not a great strategy if you need the job. So be aware of all the gifts you bring, all the things you do for other people. When Jesus says, love each other as you love yourself, he did not say, love your neighbor more than yourself. So we want to have that balance, and especially, folks, when we're in this stage of our life, when God granted us time, he did not mean for us to fill it with 50 obligations. That's my personal. I think he meant for us to have more quiet reflection and to be more mindful of where we're putting the gifts God gave us. Obligers have trouble delegating, and they'll often take on their role and 3 other people in the group. They won't even ask, they'll just do it. And you must have systems of accountability. Just really give yourself, one of my friends, both she and her mom love to sleep in. And her mom's like 89. I think at 89, you should be able to sleep as long as you want. But anyway, they both decided, and this is my friend just retired, that one day a week they did want to get up. So it was quiet before everybody else in the household was up. And so they called each other, and because they wanted to do Bible reading. So they called each other, and one week it was the daughter's turn, the next week it was the mother's turn. And if the other person didn't answer, there was a backup plan. Like at the nursing home where the mom lived, then the backup plan was we call the station and we say, we're up, Mom. And at home, it was the spouse. And of course, this was an upholder, and she didn't really want her spouse to know she wasn't up. So it worked great. But they carved out their time. So here's just a snapshot of you obligers are reliable and are responsible to others. It's just one of the best parts of you. You're willing to go the extra mile, and you're highly committed to others. You're a team player. You don't have to be in charge. You work great. You blend. You often do the majority of what needs to get done in this world. So, yay. So some of the disadvantages, you do have a harder time saying no, or imposing limits, even when your own health is at risk sometimes. Just be aware of that. You do need outer accountability to change that habit of saying yes to everything. So my friend that did the 30-day detox, she had an accountability partner who also had trouble saying no, and they both tried to make it for 30 days without signing up for something new. And sometimes when you get in that oblige or rebellion, you can resent other people who don't do as much as you. So again, if you start having that thought in there, how come I'm the only one that shows up and does this? Pay attention. All right, our rebels. Let me do it my way and I'm all in. Let's see. Okay, Mr. Rebel, gotcha. All right. Rebels resist both outer expectations. I tell you like, hey, would you go get those lights or whatever? And you might say to yourself, I can't quite see, I should go get those lights. Might not do either of them. You do value freedom, choice, self-expression, and being authentic. That is one of the things about rebels. Who you are is in everything you do. So you're not a hidden mystery. If someone asks or tells a rebel to do something, our first response is usually to resist. There's an exception to that. Loved ones, grandchildren. But you do struggle with being closely supervised. If you're on a committee, you do not like to be supervised because that supervisor is likely to tell you when to do something, how to do something, and what to do. And then you got that rebel filter all the time and you can't get to it because you've got these thoughts. You also sometimes don't like routines. Okay. Rebels may work a series of jobs or careers. Routine starts to feel boring. I love a routine. Give me a routine any day. Not for rebels. That doesn't feel right. They may love to meet a challenge in their own way. So this is one way to work with or speak with the rebel. So if I were married, I can't, upholder and rebel, I don't know. But anyway, if I were married to a rebel and let's say a value of our family was, we're both retired now, let's go work somewhere together in a volunteer kids food basket or something. Then I would not say, hey, I think it would be a good idea if we go to kids food basket. First, I would say something like, you're such a person of giving. Your heart is really towards others. If it would work out in your time, with your time, could we think about it? Do you see 3 ways I softened that? First, I went to their value. Then I also connected that to what we might be doing. And I didn't give them a timeline, like you have to agree this moment. Because sometimes when rebels have time to think, they come back and they say, I'm in. So that's that thing of, let me do it my way. Let me arrive in my time. Does that make sense? Yes. Do we all have maybe a rebel we've encountered? Other than all of our kids when they're in middle school, I'm just saying. No, actually mine was quite an upholder then. I used to worry about him being too good sometimes. Here's the other thing about rebels. You may act differently out of love. If your spouse says, this is really important to me. I know that you, yes, out of love, you will soften your rebel thinking and say, I'm in. And that's a way we can align with rebels sometimes too. So let me tell you some other ways not to speak to rebels. Like I spoke to my 6th to 8th grader. First, I nagged him. Those assignments are not going to get done by themselves. I probably said it in better kid language. Then I tried rewarding him. Okay, you get 4 assignments done and raise the grade from, an E to a D. And hey, I'm a realist. When you're working with kids, you don't go from E's to A's. I'm just telling you. This is middle school. Remember that middle school brain? So then I can't remember what it was. It was something he liked. That didn't work. He didn't even try. Nope. Then I tried reality. Okay, you're just going to fail every class. So he got his grades and I called him down and showed it to him. No effect. Then I tried taking him, I think I went to Jack Keller Ford and said, you know, to the person there, because he loved cars. I said, you know, what do you have to know to be able to work here? And he said, well, first of all, you have to have a high school degree and 2 years of college, and you have to know this CAD program. And so he listened and he showed him around. Nothing. Got nothing. So had I known or remembered this is what I might have softened to. Also being a social worker. I understand in your family that you have never seen someone graduate. And so you don't know what doors that might open. He did have a learning disability. I said, you're really smart in math. It was in reading. And I said, you know, your brain I would have probably done some research with him online and let him do it. In the next week, I'm going to give you a pass to the library. And then you come back and tell me if there's any one small thing about math, if you feel like it. I would have to really use that language and see if I could soften that thinking. And I might not have, but every time I went up with the nagging and the almost shaming and the whatever, big resist. So it was, I always think though, Vicki, when you know better, you do better. I didn't know that back then. I brought the best I could to the table, but I was not able to help that student. So now when I encounter rebels in my life, don't have very many, but I have a few, then I think about if I want the whole purpose of this, if I want to communicate so that they can hear me, how many people know the 5 love languages kind of? Ooh, we should do that. 5 love languages. Honestly, it's a way to speak to your spouse and your loved ones in a way that helps them to understand what you're talking about. This is what this is. How do I speak to a rebel? How do I speak to myself if I'm a rebel? This is what I love about all of these. And we're getting really close to being end of time. Let me just do this for rebels. Independent-minded, able to think outside the box, very valuable in an organization. They're a plus. And if you get them in touch with their authentic values, nothing can stop a rebel from helping to change a system. We see some, you know, rebels on TV leading causes. And again, would we be a country if we hadn't had some? If they didn't think outside the box and didn't put up with the way things were? But they do struggle with repetitive and mandatory things. So they may need to change jobs, or if you're with them, they may need a different task. You may want to let them say, hey, here's a whole pot of things to do. I know you have the skill set. Which one do you want to do? And then let me know within this big framework when it could be done. They may be restless, they may change. And then sometimes the downside of rebels, they may act like ordinary rules don't apply to them. That can be a little annoying. But again, we love them. We accept the way they're wired, and thank God for some rebels, or I wouldn't live where I live now, and I wouldn't be voting, and just so many things would not be happening in our society. And I always talk too long. We've done a lot of that. You have a sheet there, speaking with your spouses and loved ones, understanding and sharing your tendency with your spouse and your children. You know, after I did this, I talked with my son and daughter-in-law to, you know, tell them I was an upholder. So again, they got 2 little kids, but when they tell me to pick Alice up at 9, I will be there at 9. So it'd be great if you had her ready at 9, because the 5-year-old doesn't want to, you know, as best you can. And my son's, he's an upholder questioner. My daughter-in-law, she's an obliger upholder. So, you know, they're all about routines and rules. But once in a while, when all of us find ourselves, like in the pandemic, without that structure, we got cranky at each other. So it was good for us to know. I finally said one time, my upholder self is not liking the unknown. And then they both chimed in and said, oh, it's so great to hear you say that. Just makes me worry. So having a conversation, we can approach our loved ones in a way that's going to get our message across. Like, like if I'd known how to speak to my rebel middle schooler there, I would have had a better chance. And if I'm going to relate with someone, I certainly want to speak in the language they can hear, because we got something between us we need to resolve, or I want to help them with something, I want to be a plus in their life. Most spouses do not share the same tendency, unlike you guys, but so it's really useful to understand both how you're wired and convey that to your spouses and your children. And even on a committee, like I think, a couple of years ago, before I went back to work, I was working on something with some neighbors, and I said in the middle of it, you guys probably don't know the 4 tendencies, but I'm an upholder and kind of a rule follower, and I can get a little bossy. So you just let me know if that starts happening. And we knew each other well enough. And I got called out a couple times, but that gave them permission then to say to me, Vicki, So, children, in-laws, siblings, close friends, they're all can be enhanced by knowing ourselves, knowing other folks, giving grace to ourselves, giving grace to other people. That you don't see it the way I do, to me it's just an asset. So kind of the basics. I know we're going to have lunch pretty soon. Anybody got a couple questions? Like I said, I'm going to share this, and I've got right at the bottom there, Gretchen with an E-N, Rubin.com. That's her site.
Great.
Right.
We do have time for
Anybody got? Yeah. Yes.
Leslie, let me get to you here.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if we lost our Zoom person or not. I don't see anybody else there.
You see many people that are rebels also be questioners?
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. Remember the overlap?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Do you observe that too?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say, because I am a questioner. When I was young, I asked my mother what color was the grass, and she said, Barbara, the grass is green. I said, why is it green? So, stuff like that. But I'm a questioner, but I sort of go in that whole full circle. I have a little of each one of those tendencies within me.
Of course, we all have all of them. Yes. And in different situations or different times of our life, like I was saying, I was much more of a kind of a 90% upholder. Not, I can be an obliger too, but as I've gotten older, I have more questions. So I've grown, and I might be different with my spouse than I am with someone I just meet, I've only met for a few times. So that's good to know about ourselves.
I got a question about obligers. There is some people that are obligers and they volunteer for everything and they do everything, but they still, they don't follow. There's a rebel and they don't follow the rules, like somebody else is in charge, but they will take away from want to be in charge. So, they take over rather than just doing the duties that they're supposed to be doing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think you're right. And again, there is a bit of there's an overlap between the obliger and kind of like looking for this situation where I let my rebel out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Anybody else?
They're the person that says to take the quiz.
Yes.
And pamphlet here, it says, take it a happier cast. So
There's probably 2 different links. There's 2 different ways to get to it. Yep. And it's free and they don't give out your email. So I'd really take it. I'd have anybody that you love in your life who's willing to take it. It gives you, really gives you information. Yeah.
2 things.
Yeah.
I checked out her website.
Yes.
I would encourage everyone, if you have the interest, to do it. It's phenomenal. The resources,
I
the
know.
podcasts, the articles. It is a phenomenal resource. And there's something on there about how getting through the holidays also, which I thought was really good. And that's where I found the quiz, but I didn't do it because I wanted to pay attention there. But the other thing is, this really surprised me because they started bringing in the lunch about 20 minutes ago. And I said, they shouldn't be bringing in the lunch because we're not eating till 12. And so I had in mind, we were going to 12. That's how personally I was engaged with you. I didn't
Okay.
know that this ended at 11:30.
Okay.
So thank you. I mean, it's wonderful what you've done.
You're welcome. I feel like her framework is really a gift of all of us.
Yeah.
And the other thing is too, she has a podcast I've listened to for 5 years. Oftentimes she'll talk about the tendency with someone that you and I all might know. We think, oh, so-and-so is an upholder. I think it's called Happier. Yeah, it's a free podcast. Yep. You got it right there. With Gretchen Rubin, yes. And she always has tips and tools for habit change. I'll tell you my number one, just because we have a second. It's called the 1 minute rule. And I think it's probably in this, Better Habits. The 1 minute rule. Anything that we can get done, if I walk down to the basement, when you're retired, things that you can do anytime, sometimes you don't do them at all because you have all this time. So when I walk down to the basement, first of all, I have to remember why I came down there. Then if I come down there and there's like something on the pool table to put away, I want to go in my sewing room. I've learned, I say to myself when I come down there, you may do something for 1 minute. Otherwise, I'm down there 35 minutes and I haven't. So it helps my brain, but finish it and put it away. If you are on, you get a lot of emails. 1 minute. If you can finish that email, get done with it in 1 minute, close it out, great. If it's something that needs more thought, I love the 1 minute rule. The other one I love, sorry, I'm going to get excited about our habits. I love the visual space of one empty junk drawer. Now I'm an organizer. So my junk drawer is pretty organized, but that's this book. When I am rattled, my spirit is not the greatest, things have happened. I'm highly sensitive, so I do absorb a lot of people's emotional energy. And in my job right now, there's things going on. I go home, to this one drawer that I open, it's empty. It's like emptying my mind out. Kind of a mindfulness thing. So anyway, those are, and I know, yes, I have been known to come over and help people organize, but yes, that'll be my third or fourth career. Yeah.
Vicki, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your stories and just providing this framework for us so that we can better understand ourselves and one another. One of the ongoing themes that we are taking on as a Paulist ministry is combating toxic polarization and the divisiveness that both in our country and in our church, right, in society. But it really starts at the smallest level, right, with the people we know and the people we may just be meeting. So this is a great framework for us to add that to our toolbox of how we take on toxic polarization. So thank you. Thank you. I also want to thank the members of our 55 plus program series. If you could raise your hands, those of you that are members of our program team, thank you very much for your time and contributions to coming up with the programming that we offer here. And as a program team, we'll compare notes about which of us are obligers and questioners and how we're working together so well. All right. I also want to thank Amanda, our administrative assistant, her work for just making sure the hospitality is taken care of and everybody has what they need, your attention to detail and diligence in that. Thank you. And we'll compare notes too about where we fit on the process. Yeah. So, and finally, thank you for joining us all today. The conversation will continue as we have lunch. Here, let me turn this down because I realize I'm using my outdoor voice. You can probably hear me just fine. Yeah, in the back, you're good? Yeah, all right. Just want to give some announcements about some of our upcoming programs. Our next gathering for this 55 plus series is coming up actually quite quickly. December 1st, we are hosting Father Stephen Dudek, who is the director of missions for the Diocese of Grand Rapids, and he's going to be talking about, he was featured on the cover of Faith magazine most recently, for those of us that get that. And he is going to be talking about making room in the inn, making room in our hearts for the Lord. So an Advent theme, but a particular focus on the tradition in Hispanic culture of posadas and what we can learn from the posada tradition about making room in the inn and making room in our hearts for the Lord in his coming during Advent and Christmas. December 6th is our annual Advent Ecumenical Evening of Reflection. We are teaming up again with Bethlehem Lutheran, St. Mark's Episcopal, and Westminster Presbyterian to host an ecumenical dialogue. We'll also be hosting Presbyterian minister Reverend Timothy Chon, who is an artist pastor, and his artwork is going to be on exhibit here in the Information Center starting in Advent. We'll actually be putting the installation up just before Thanksgiving, so next week, and invite all of you to come check out his artwork, but then also come and hear him and his story of moving from grieving to joy as a community following the pandemic, and that we find ourselves kind of in this in-between, right? And to some extent, the difference between happiness and joy. And so we'll be exploring that, but also entering into what we share with our brothers and sisters across Christian denominations. So we hope you can join us for that. And as I said, we also are continuing the conversation about combating toxic polarization. Father Stephen Bell did an inspiring job last Thursday night for our annual Gallagher talk in introducing the topic to us and the three fates of toxic polarization. If you haven't had a chance to, if you didn't get to come and you haven't had a chance to see the recording, highly recommend it. We have that posted to our YouTube channel. We're going to be working with the Gallagher talk, Gallagher. We're going to continue that conversation with a couple of workshops next month, and in January, Kevin McIntosh from One America Project is going to be here to do a workshop in December on the 13th on storytelling through difficult conversations, about storytelling as a strategy, rather than all the data dump that some of us questioners can provide, right? Like all the demographics, here's why we should be doing this, because 75% of the people make up statistics 75% of the time. But rather that using storytelling can be a way about sharing when we personally are vulnerable with one another, can really combat some of the divisiveness that we have in our conversations. And then in January, he's going to be talking about the science of polarization, about what neuroscience is teaching us about how we sort and divide, healthy and unhealthy ways of doing that. So we hope you join us for that. All the details are on our website. And of course, if you're already getting our newsletter, which goes out every Thursday, there's details in that. And if you're not getting our newsletter, we encourage you to sign up and become a friend of the Catholic Information Center. Finally, events like this wouldn't be possible without the contributions of our friends and associates. And so thank you. Thanks for your contribution. And if you'd like to become a donor, even a recurring donor, you can do so online at our website, www.catholicinformationcenter.org/give. All right, let's, again, we're going to continue the conversation here about the four tendencies over lunch, but let's take a moment to ask God's blessing on the rest of our time together. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord our God, we thank you for the gift of life, everything you've created, and how wonderfully and fearfully we are made. We thank you for revealing yourself to us in the gift of your Son. We thank you for the love that you've given us to share with one another. We ask that you bless us in the rest of this time together this morning. Bless the food which we are about to receive. May it strengthen us to continue to be about your work in the world through our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you again, Vicki.